Isaiah Jackson. Isaiah Jackson is a player who we traded for. We traded Aaron Holiday for the pick that we used to draft Isaiah Jackson. I did a scouting report on Isaiah Jackson for the 13th pick, actually. He didn't crack my top 10. I think he should have, because seeing him play in the NBA, a lot of my doubts that I had of him, not very worried about them anymore. Isaiah is a guy that. I'm going to get to the point of this video. Isaiah is a guy that has always admired and wanted to be like Kevin Garnett. We all know Kevin Garnett. Intense, tough, physical, mentally abusive. Remember, he called Charlie Villanueva a cancer patient, and he told Carmelo Anthony that his wife tasted like Honey Nut Cheerios. Kevin Garnett is one of the most insane basketball players ever. And Isaiah Jackson might be like that by the end of his career. We could have an Isaiah Jackson Honey Nut Cheerio story on our hands eventually. Which, you know what? That's completely fine with me. Bring all the intense, tough, angry players on my basketball team. I want to see that all day because they want to win. I'm going to list off some similarities. And actually, I'm going to list off the differences first and then the similarities second, because there are very, very few differences between the two. There's two differences that I've kind of identified that are big. One, Isaiah Jackson is a constant lob threat at all frickin' times. He is a lob threat. You could throw him a lob wherever, whenever, and he will grab it and jam it down. Kevin Garnett was not much of a lob threat kind of guy. Second difference, basketball IQ. This one isn't like I'm saying Isaiah Jackson doesn't know stuff about basketball. What I'm saying is that Kevin Garnett, I'm not judging Kevin Garnett's rookie year and Isaiah Jackson's rookie year. I am taking into account all of Kevin Garnett's career. Across Kevin Garnett's whole career, very high basketball IQ, very smart player. Isaiah Jackson isn't there yet. I think he could be there eventually. Eventually, he will get to a point to where I think his IQ for basketball can be on the same level as Kevin Garnett. Now let's get into the similarities. They're lanky and they're around the same size, freaking long wingspans, kind of skinny, that kind of build, but they're muscular. It's like, they are built very similarly. Only difference is Kevin Garnett is bald and Isaiah Jackson's got some nice dreads. So, intensity and aggressiveness. Now, I'm not saying that Isaiah Jackson is as intense and aggressive as Kevin Garnett is currently, or as Kevin Garnett was. But I am saying that eventually Isaiah Jackson will definitely be as intense and as aggressive as Kevin Garnett. We've all seen Isaiah Jackson yell, scream, freaking get close to headbutting the post like Kevin Garnett did. Like, he's a passionate guy. He's tough. He's gritty. He embodies everything you want in his style of play. Post up, good defender. Like, he embodies it, Aggressive, tough center who's a bit undersized, but makes up for being a bit undersized with his intensity and his aggressiveness. Just like Kevin Garnett was one of the first big men who had, a nice, smooth jumper. Like him and Dirk Nowitzki or some of those guys that were bigs in the 90s and the 2000s who had smooth, clean catch-and-shoot jumpers. Isaiah Jackson is the same way. He didn't have that good of a jumper in college, but in the NBA, we have seen him knock down some good shots. Like, he can catch it and he can shoot it. He's similar in that category. Defensively, Isaiah Jackson freaking brings it defensively. I'm pretty sure his career high is already like 3 or 4 blocks in a game. And yeah, one game where he had like 3 steals. Like, his defensive ability is amazing. And it was like that in college. He was averaging like 2 or 3 blocks a game in college. He was beating up children, basically. And the final similarity is both are pretty athletic basketball players. It's just Isaiah Jackson, I think, utilizes his athleticism a bit more than Kevin Garnett. I think Kevin Garnett could have used his athleticism a bit more, but it wasn't really in his play style and in the game plan for him to rely on his athleticism. Whereas Isaiah Jackson with the lobs and stuff like that, he uses his athleticism a bit more because he's younger. But I'm sure as he gets older, he will rely less and less on his athleticism and rely more and more on his fundamentals because they will develop as he gets into his career, farther and farther down the line. So, I think that Isaiah Jackson could be like Kevin Garnett. I'm not going to say that he's going to be as good as Kevin Garnett, accolades and all-star appearances and all that. But what I will say is that he definitely, as a prospect, reminds me of Kevin Garnett, and that's what I have as his ceiling. That is a pretty good ceiling. One of the greatest power forwards of all time is his ceiling. That is a great ceiling, and it's the player that he likes. He grew up admiring and wanting to be like Kevin Garnett, and now he's being compared to Kevin Garnett. Like, I don't think he'd complain either about people saying he plays like Kevin Garnett. I think he'd prefer it. So, Isaiah Jackson, great ball player. He's gonna be great. As long as we keep him and give him minutes, he will be great. And he will be a huge part of the rebuild. Just his defense, his rebounding, his offensive ability. He's a very versatile player. He can play center and power forward, and he can guard bigger centers despite being undersized because he has defensive skills that allow him to make up for his size differential. Kind of like what Miles Turner does sometimes on some of the taller 7-footers in the league. So, Isaiah Jackson, I think one day he could be very, very good. I'll see you guys next time. As always, I'm not funny, and I hope we keep Isaiah Jackson, because I enjoy watching Isaiah Jackson. Just his intensity, his grittiness, his toughness, it's all beautiful to see all in one package. See you guys next time.
Just got unlucky on a few plays tonight, One of those plays, I thought he was standing still, but he just hit the shit out of that one guy, and the guy went flying. They blew the whistle, and they called it on him.